here. Cool. So this is the Habitat issue triage for the week of February 28th, 2017. The query address is available in Habitat, I believe, which is, well, now it is. I just posted it. I'll post it in chat here for anybody who wants to follow along. That looks right to me. Cool. And I'll go ahead and share my screen. We can kind of get started here. Sweet. Can everybody see this? Okay. Yeah. All right. So first issue that we're going to hit today is number 1820. This is pretty straightforward. I think we can pretty much just put it in a milestone. We can put it in help wanted or whatever. We don't have any documentation on permanent peer at all anywhere. And I didn't even know it was a thing until Adam started talking about it in chat the other day. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So then I went to the docs and realized, nope, we don't have anything on it. So,
yep. Yeah, it should get documented.
I'm going to put it in accepted minor because it's something we need to do. But I plan to do it. I've just been busy the last couple of days. So, all right, next one is
just a quick note. If I just drop and go away, it's my home internet's going unstable on me. So,
okay.
I don't want to listen.
Yeah, no problem. The next issue is going to be 1816. So I'll give you all a second to read that.
Yeah, that's definitely a bug we need to fix.
This is related to another open issue, isn't it?
Possibly. Let's take a look.
There's an issue that was related to configuration stuff. Maybe not. Maybe I'm.
Yeah, there might have been a previous one that package export solved, but.
Oh, maybe, yeah. So I thought that there was some issue related specifically to various things getting updated, but I can't remember if it was like the run hook changing or something. I don't know. Anyways, this is going to be accepted minor, I would assume, correct?
Yes. That'd be mine.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an important thing to fix.
Yeah.
All right. 1812. Yeah. I think that we've had conversations about this internally, haven't we?
Yeah, it doesn't feature. It's probably worth discussing on there as well, because there's probably some discussion about the implementation that needs to happen.
All right. I guess we don't need to put that into a milestone right immediately.
No.
All right. Should we? Yeah, well, maybe not. All right, that's fine. Reconfigure without restart. I was actually working with Justin on this morning. So the general idea here is to have a hook that can cause a service to reload its config without restarting the actual service itself, right? So the example that Justin had is in his thing here is HA proxy. And HA proxy, more or less, as well as a couple other services, like I think Nginx will allow you to do this. It's sort of a quote unquote zero downtime service restart, which more or less just reloads the config. So I think that he's mostly gotten this implemented, actually, but he ran into some trouble this morning. We can kind of talk about that real quick. It turns out that the way the HA proxy works is that it doesn't actually reuse the same PID. So what it does when it goes to do this like zero downtime reconfigure or whatever is it actually creates a new PID and basically switches the thread over to the new PID.
So it just drains the traffic out of the old
Yep.
one and sends. Yeah. It's funny because when I was looking at this, I was thinking, in the Windows space, .NET configuration, ASP.NET configuration changes are almost identical. They start up a new worker process as old ones are draining out. Which in which case, yeah, you on the one hand, you don't want to just axe the process altogether, but at the same time, yeah, if when it starts its new process, then the supervisor has no awareness of that process.
Right. Yes, exactly. So so that's what he was running into. So the first thing that we ran into was that the PID is owned by root, which means that if you're not using package service user root in your plan, then the PID can't be accessed. So then the problem is that, like, even after the PID can be accessed, if the service itself is expecting to regenerate like that, the supervisor isn't aware. So we were discussing like maybe having some kind of function that enables specifying the location, configuring the location of a PID.
Well, if we can expose some kind of a hook, whatever special logic you need to do. So if your app doesn't need to do anything, doesn't need to do any restart, you could just do a no op. But if your app does do something like this, where it starts up a whole new process, then you can do whatever gymnastics you have to do to do that. But that's right, yeah. But then you still have to be able to, once that new PID starts up, you have to be able to somehow have some way of communicating that back.
Yep.
Yeah.
The problem is that the supervisor is basically not aware. There's no way to currently.
Right. Yeah.
Because so we were looking in the code, and it looks like the have child process function or whatever is what happens. We spawn that process, and and so then it's only looking for that. It's never looking for anything else.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Right, which brings up other challenges. Like, let's say you could communicate that PID. All you're doing is communicating a PID, and if I recall rightly, I mean, it used to be that we would just track the PID, but I think with some of the Windows refactoring goes, we like keep a handle on the actual process, I think, and if so, that definitely gets stickier.
Yep, I think that's what we were seeing this morning. So I think that there's value in this, but the implementation details are kind of complicated, more complicated than what we originally thought. So I know that, like, as it stands, Justin has a PR that's basically ready that implements a not like a reconfigure. It's like I can't remember what he called it, but he has a PR that's ready to do this hook, but this specific use case kind of falls outside of that.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, I don't know. It's something that probably we should get some comments on and have some discussion around.
And that stuff that he ran into doesn't look like none of that stuff was commented on in the issue, right? That was just
nope. We just found that this morning.
Yeah,
and then well, this morning for me and evening for him, and then he had to bounce out. So
yeah.
I can update with the stuff that we found, but I would assume that he's also probably going to do that with some code snippets and everything.
Cool.
So that being said, I think we can put this in help wanted for now. It's probably worth having people look at it. If we can all look at it and just see if we have any ideas for how to solve it. And I'll
sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I joined a little bit late. Sorry about that. I had another meeting. So I spoke with Biomighty Arts about this. There was 2 tasks that he was looking at tackling. This was one of them. I think that this is one that he plans to do right after the work that he's doing right now. Can you scroll up really quick? I want to make sure that I'm talking about the right one. Reconfigure without restart. This is what he's working on right now.
So I actually got on a call with him this morning.
Yeah.
So he's made some work. He's made progress in it.
Mm-hmm.
In that, like, he actually has the new hook implemented more or less.
Yep.
But the problem is that, like, this specific use case that he has here is actually not solved by this hook. And the reason why is that the way that HA proxy functions specifically is that it actually generates a new PID and then kind of switches and does this, little roulette on the back end. And so, like, the problem being that, like, even if we were to make a change that enabled the user, the package service user, to own the PID file, it still doesn't solve the problem of the supervisor is not aware of the new PID. So what ends up happening is it just kind of bombs out.
Right. This will be solved when the supervisor no longer owns the children and instead reads the PID file to figure out who it's supposed to be supervising.
Yes. So, and that's for the multi-threading or multi-service supervisor?
That's after multi-service, and it's the launcher work, which is we're changing the process structure so that way the launcher launches the supervisor and sends messages to the launcher to launch services while the supervisor just watches the data directory. And why we're doing that is so that way we can upgrade the supervisor without re-parenting all of the children and then losing access to them.
Right. Yep. So that will totally fix this. Jamie, would you be willing to leave a comment of that nature to this issue?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Awesome. And this is probably, I was going to say, this is probably accepted major. Steven just sent me a message, I think, to say as much. Let me see. Yeah. Yep. Cool. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next one, which is 1805. Give everybody a second to read through this that hasn't.
Yeah. And I think that is compounded by the fact that, correct me if I'm wrong, we use those arguments used to take, I could be totally wrong on this, I think they used to take just ports, and we've changed it so that they take, full endpoints. Does that ring a bell to anyone, or am I totally wrong on that?
There were other parameters that were port.
Yeah, for some reason, and so like I know that this stumped me like a couple weeks ago when I was putting my demo together. It was the first time I had like dealt with binding in like a month or so, and I could have sworn like when I did it in a month or so, it was just at all. Like it does, when it totally could be friendly. Like that'd be pretty easy to just say this is the format we're looking for, and even go further, where if you do just put in the port, maybe we default to 0000.
Yep.
Yeah, we in the code, we panic, we unwrap. It's just like it was thrown together. It looks like this is an easy fix. And what you just said is right. Like if you don't specify the full identifier, you could just assume they meant 000, or just tell them we want the full identifier. Either one.
And we'll spit it out to the console, so it's not like there's not like a mystery of what is it listening on. So yeah,
it's an easy. It should be an easy fix.
Yeah,
like 6 lines.
I was thinking 5, but.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to 1641. This is one that we've talked about, I think, in the past during a couple of triages.
Oh yeah, I think he just put in a PR for this. Justin, that is, like, as in the last, like earlier this morning. I could be wrong. Let's see.
Yep, he's got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to review the PR yet, but he's read in on what we need to do, which is create a new service struct and reload it completely instead of manipulating one.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, since he's already working on it, I'll just put it in help wanted, since it seems like it's pretty much he's going to write it. So / already wrote it. Here we go. All right. Oops, 1 second. All right, so 1779 is the next one.
Oh.
I think that this could probably get closed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I weighed in with I wanted other people's opinions instead of just saying no. The thing is that Handlebar's behavior is this. Yeah, it makes sense that you should protect people, right, and give them helpful messaging, but Handlebars isn't for configuration templating. Like, we're using it for that, but it's made for the web, and it's made choices around that. So the truthiness of switching in Handlebars supports null, undefined, false, blank string. Like, that's part of the Handlebars language. I think that making this change would be pretty big to the Handlebars crate. And yes, we would no longer have Handlebars. We'd have our equivalent of Handlebars.
Yeah, this would be a major change to that. Having just spent a significant amount of time.
Right. Yeah, you have a good perspective on this.
In there. Yeah.
Stephen, would you be willing to share your perspective on that?
Yeah, I can update that one.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
And part of the beauty of just using Handlebars as is, anybody that's familiar with Handlebars should like know what's going on. And if we like create some mutants string, then it's suddenly becomes less clear.
Yeah.
Yep.
We could absolutely do some lint checking tool that like looks through and looks at what your default tonal is and figures out like and what your binds are and goes through your config files and your hooks and just says, yeah, you didn't misspell anything, right? Or
Yeah, that would be totally useful. And because we include the package metadata now, the binds and exposes stuff, we could totally check for a lot of that.
mm-hmm.
And we know what's exposed in the service config struct. So we could definitely do some validation that way. But yeah,
I think it's an out of band lint checking tool is the answer maybe.
Yep, I agree with that. Steven, I'll let you update that one. Once you got that, you may want to push Martin to open a new issue that's more in line with the out of band lint checking.
no, I'm just going to I'll change the title of it and add something to that effect.
All right,
Yeah.
that's good. Thank you. And then I guess that would probably be help wanted for now.
Yep.
Thank you. Cool. So the next one is 1798.
Yeah, I mean, we'll bump to this when when we have the time to test. I think this could be help wanted. This is they're just asking to bump to use the released versions of ZMQ and static file. We had to depend on Git versions of it because they hadn't created release when we were bumping up a bunch of versions of our other things. But we haven't recently run cargo update and also removed out the Git references. So this is just kind of like a house cleaning task that we eventually got to do.
Yep. All right. $17.78.
Does anyone have an opinion on this?
Yeah, I don't know. Personally, the less coupled to Docker, I think the better, but I don't know the actual implementation details of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's possible to do it. I don't know how much work is involved. Fletcher did the initial implementation, so it might be nice to get his feedback on it. He's on vacation right now, but he'll be back next week.
Okay.
We should maybe just put this in his queue and tell him to take a look.
Cool. That'll be fine. I'll leave a note as much. All right. 1733. So I think I read through this a few weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
or last week or something. I don't know that this is actually a problem.
It is a problem if you run the studio in an interactive way and then you you run a number of builds through it. It's potentially an issue because that breaks the rule of isolation. So there's two ways you can do this: is every time you build a piece of software, make a new studio. And then another way to do it is add another level of isolation within a studio, and that I think is what is the suggestion here.
Yep.
I think this is more pain than it's worth, especially since we do have a mechanism in place already for isolation, and also the build service, which would parallelize your build, parallelize your builds, not paralyze them. They're just going to use a fresh studio every time anyway. They do use a fresh studio every time anyway. So that's where I sit on this, at least. I think I had a chat with Fletcher about it as well, and that was where we landed. What do you guys think?
Yeah, a fresh studio for isolation is definitely, I think, enough of a solution for this, rather than building multiple things in the same studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I might recommend asking a question instead of closing it and saying, you should do this. Instead say, do you think the option that we just proposed, starting in Fresh Studio, will create the isolation that you need? Like, is that enough?
It sounds geared towards more of like best practices or better ways of handling this. I mean, it doesn't always have to be solved technically, right? Because that's more time and money.
Yep.
And I think what we're suggesting is just, yeah, there's another way to get around this and protect your users.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the likelihood of having a studio that you're running multiple builds in, and you're building things that you personally aren't aware of the contents of seems very small to me.
I'll respond to this one, and we can go from there.
Cool. Thanks, Jay. Yeah. All right. So the next one is 1548. Gateway API does not return health check output.
Oh, this totally could be fixed now. You can remove won't fix. Yeah, we can do it now. To tell people why, instead of just telling you this magic. What we couldn't do is store the output of arbitrarily executed code in the supervisor, because potentially you could run out of memory. Like, it could just stream indefinitely into a buffer, into an infinitely growing size buffer, and crash the supervisor. What we opted for was to set up the 65K buffer, which is the same amount of size of what can come out of a program in chunks, right? And you just store the last bit, and then we write it to a file on disk, and then we truncate it every time that a hook runs. So and it also streams to the standard out, so that way it appears like normal. But now we have access to the last run thing on a file, and I'm refactoring right now the supervisor to help in assistance for multi-service tenancy. And one of the things that we needed to do was coordinate between the manager thread and then create the services in their own thread. So that way running arbitrary code, i.e. hooks, doesn't halt the entire supervisor. Like, it only screw one service up instead of all of them if we did something like that. So instead of scheduling time for the thing to work and then cutting it off, we now let them work independently. The problem with that is communicating from the HTTP gateway then through the manager into the services means that we would either have to obtain a lock on the services data, which is tough because that means that somebody could, like a malicious person, could get on the network, bake a bunch of requests for the health check, stall the supervisor out because they're holding a lock on the data constantly while the service is trying to maybe write to it. That's one downside. And then another one would have been caching, and you have to receive cache data. So through this refactor, what we're doing is writing to disk the things that the HTTP gateway wants to expose. So that way you get basically the freshest stuff, but there's no lock that needs to be obtained. So the output of the health check is very easily obtained now because the supervisor HTTP gateway no longer forces the health check to run. We periodically run the health check, and now we can get the output. So that's how we do it now.
Got it. It's seems like, so the question is this something that we put in Help Wanted for now, or is this something that we care about implementing ourselves?
We care about implementing it ourselves, probably. It's an easy one. And if we put it in Help Wanted, that whole spiel that I just gave you, it would be like, people would need to know all of that to be able to know when they could do this.
Yeah, and I wasn't typing, so.
Yeah, and also like probably no one stopped listening after the first couple fucking minutes of it.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, then I'll put it in accepted minor for now, and if you feel like updating that at some point and moving it off to Help Wanted, feel free to. But otherwise, we can just kind of assume that we'll touch it at some point.
Yeah, I'll also respond to this and say why we can do it now.
Cool. Sweet. So 17. Oh no, did that one. 1060. Back to July. That's great. Cool. So yeah, I remember this. I think that the last that we talked about this was that this that I actually started working on documentation for this a month or so, 2 months ago, whatever it was that I commented, November. But the reality was that we don't really want to document this until we've got the depot in a state that we feel like we're ready to support it.
Yeah, and documentation is part of our release process. Like, we don't want to create software without the tutorial and documentation and how to get started and how to use it. So this is an obvious yes, we will, but like you said, we just are not we're not ready to tell people to run this just yet.
Yep.
If we are telling them, which we are having to every once in a while, we're also letting them know with a big caveat, like, there's no migration plan for the thing that we're giving you. This is a stopgap.
Yep. Yeah. So this one can stay open. We'll put it in accepted minor since the documentation is going to be part of release anyways, and we'll go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1522 is next. This is not the first time I think that someone has suggested.
Somebody did submit a PR for part of it, to make part of it the Blake 2B stuff faster, but
yeah, and that's the hashing on the files, and then the compression is the XZ compression, and there was let me see if I can find it. I think there was an issue about this a while back, and there was a long, and I don't remember if it was in Habitat or if it was in GitHub. There was a long thread answer about why we picked XZ.
It might be this one.
Yeah.
This very, very long one.
Because I think it was Fletch that did a bunch of comparison tests of compression. Jamie, you probably remember this better than I.
Yeah, it was the problem. Well, I remember Fletcher doing something in this thread. It was specifically related to Docker. I think it was related to Docker. Yeah, it was the Docker VM because of the way that it handles the file system or whatever. The
No, what I'm talking about was actually earlier in the life cycle of Habitat, like when they were figuring out the Habitat package format. Am I remembering rightly, Jamie?
Yeah, we did comparison tests, but like that's a while ago with a smaller data set. And what almost all the things that we were building for were optimizing around native applications and not dynamic apps, which those typically, I mean, they aren't compiled down bytecode, right? Like,
Right.
so this could be a real problem for some types of apps. And what we need to think about is, do we want to optimize for speed or file size? I don't remember, other than we were striking a balance between those two, why we chose XC or not. Fletcher definitely would, because he's the person who did the benchmarks, and then I happened to be the person that implemented it because I was writing the libarchive stuff.
Yeah, I believe, if I recall correctly, it was optimizing for the download from the depot experience. So that XC was the smallest at the. It was the best trade-off to get the smallest archive.
Yeah.
And actually, Dave, you may remember some of this too.
Yeah, I was in on those conversations, and it was because it was smaller than the tar artifacts we were making. But I think it was slower.
Yeah.
I think that was the trade-off we made in the beginning.
Yeah, slower compressing to have a smaller artifact for download, because you're going to have multiple downloads versus one-time compressing.
Mm-hmm.
That was the discussion I remember at the time. Doesn't mean it's still the right choice now, but that was the context that I had.
Yeah, so striking the balance between file size and speed, right? And we can revisit that. It might be worth noting that in a future situation, there's no timeline on this. This is just something that I know will happen eventually. There'll only be one supervisor downloading the software for your ring in the first place, and then what we're going to do is BitTorrent it out and subsidize it with that, basically. So download speeds might eventually become irrelevant at some point, right? We can revisit it then too. If I've actually only seen this complaint once or twice, so doesn't mean it's not real. It's just I'd love to have a repro too. Like, we should know how big of an app does it take before it sucks.
Right.
Maybe we should ask that in this ticket here. I could do it. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen that happen with some of the larger apps that I've done. Like, once you start getting, I mean, I don't have the metrics as far as what the threshold is, but it seems like somewhere around 100 megs.
Mm-hmm.
When you start pushing that, the weight does become painful. But that's physics too. The bigger the app, the longer the longer it's going to take to compress. And I think that's that may just be the long tail too. That might not be the majority.
Yeah. There is a world too where we allow you to specify if you want to optimize for file size and like simply you look at the magic header and our code can tell what it was compressed with. It's no problem.
Yep.
All right. We'll do one more, and then we can kind of switch discussion over to community development stuff. So 1733, 1519 is the next one. Has anybody? I don't imagine that any of us have probably tested entering a studio behind a proxy with authentication.
Yeah. And, does a password wrapped in that way have to be URL encoded?
That I do not know.
I'm sure it does because the @ is a special identifier.
Yeah.
He does say here he has an @, so we could probably repro this and get it fixed.
Yeah.
Is this something that we want to do ourselves?
Unless a customer asks for it, I don't think that this is a bug that we would prioritize.
All right, perfect. Cool. So, not many left in this list. That's pretty awesome. We're almost caught up with triaging all the things, down to 22 open, and some of these are things that we've already talked about in the past. So some of them are going to be, don't even count in this list. So that's great. Cool. Well, so what I had planned to do, it looks like we lost Dave, but what I had planned to do today, and what we're going to try to start doing, even if we don't end up doing anything totally productive today, is we'd like to have everybody with a vested interest, all the community members with a vested interest in the Habitat project, to have a space where they can come in and talk about big picture stuff, talk about hang on a second, let me stop my screen share here. Where we can talk big picture stuff, where we can discuss as a group things that are going on, things that they might like to hack on, and have people from the team here who are willing to answer questions, which can be whoever can be here. There's no pressure either way. And then what's more is, like, at a certain point, we kind of plan to mobilize some of our community members that are interested in doing that around this list of help wanted features and bugs that maybe the Core Eng team is not going to have time to hack on, as well as like blog posts and kind of collaborating on various things that can help develop not just the software but the community around the software. So it's the does that make sense, Ben? Hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that in line with what we talked about before?
Yeah, exactly. So I thought it would be great if, I don't know if you guys follow the Rust Weekly, or I don't know how much hits they get or how much participation but I thought how the Rust Weekly newsletter looks, it states, here's what we were working on, here are some of the features that we're working on, what's up next. Here's some other issues and bugs that we need help on. Here's now your chance just to get started with learning Rust or how Habitat works in general.
Yeah.
Or that sent out every week is pretty enticing enough for, at least from users like me, to come and check out the project even more. And it's like, oh yeah, you guys really need help, and I really love open source. I do definitely want to help.
Yeah. So Stephen and I talked about this at the rally. I think you were in that meeting, weren't you, Stephen?
Yep.
So this is totally something, and this weekend, okay, well, the Rust community just generally have some of the best practices and tooling of any open source project that I've ever been around and interacted with. And This Week in Rust is awesome. They've also got this other thing, this tool. What's it called? It might be a Mozilla thing, actually.
Welcome bot, or oh no, they're the front end. Yeah.
Yep.
The,
They just aggregate all of their. They use the GitHub API and they aggregate all of their easy issues, and they organize them into like time blocks, how much time they assume are those issues will take to solve, and then they dump them all into a front end where new users can just like go and see things to contribute or to hack on. And assuming that if we go down this path of like building a This Week in Habitat kind of weekly mailer, which I think is a great idea, going that path, we basically already be aggregating all that same data, right? So that the only challenge that we saw when we were looking at it from the community engineering team, the only challenge that we saw with it is that with the This Week in Habitat stuff, there is a certain amount of manual intervention there, because like finding blog posts and meetups and things like that, there's no like, they're not scraping that data. They have a person who's like going and doing it. And I'm totally not opposed to start organizing people around that if we have enough people who are interested in like, yeah, this one Sunday a month, I search Google for habitat shit and dump it in a repo, and we have an automated system that sends it out. And I think that we would probably be willing to invest in that from the Chef community team perspective. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that either, Stephen, but.
yeah, I know Tom, our the DM's manager in community engineering, is starting to dig into what it would take to do some of that stuff across the Chef ecosystem. He's been out the last couple of weeks, so not much has happened in that direction yet. But yeah, it would definitely be awesome to have like a This Week in Habitat, and to put some of the. It might be a little lower bar to like do the since we're doing the triage, to do like the web front end that Ian described, where you have like this welcome and hey, you want to get started with when we started working on Habitat, here's some things to tackle, that kind of page, because that is a lower investment of time and resources. But yeah, we definitely want to get to the have better outbound communication about the project, and our other open source projects. I mean, it's not just Habitat that this is something that's important for Chef engineering to do.
And I don't know how much time you have, free time to work on this kind of thing, or paid time to work on this kind of thing, Ben. But I'm happy to pair with you on it, and to start picking that apart together if you want to dig in and see like what we can come up with. There'll definitely be some investment there time wise.
So at the very minimum, a thing that I'd really love us to communicate with, to begin engaging our community with and keeping them in the loop on, is what our epics are. When I say that, what I mean is what we are currently marching towards and what's most important to our team internally. This doesn't mean that everyone in the community needs to get around what we think is most important right now. It's just letting people know, like, whatever tasks that you're really passionate about might not be the thing that we are also going to be working on, but we love to see your contributions in the space that you feel is important. For the people that are watching that aren't internal to Chef or the Habitat team, the three things that we are working on right now that are really important to us are improving the supervisor in general, making it multi-tenant so multiple services are running in it, adding hooks that we need that aren't there, improving sharp edges, getting it ready so it can auto update itself, adding garbage collection to the rumors, things like that. So that way it truly is a bulletproof thing that you can run as process one in a container or process one on your OS, and you're good to go. That's one. Two is something that we call the build service or builder, and you can see a lot of crates inside the components directory that are prefaced with builder dash. That's all part of the service that's running at app.habitat.sh. If you ever hear of the private depot, this is the thing that is what a private depot is. The build service is important to us because...
Okay.
Okay. I think, that was just a noise. All right, sorry. Thought you interrupted me. That's fine. I thought you had something to say. The build service is important to us because we think that it's important to tell the story of what it looks like to roll out a vulnerability fix. So in the scenario of, let's say zlib is vulnerable, everything in the world that talks with a socket uses zlib because it's the compression library underneath everything. So if zlib had a vulnerability and you built all of your software against a specific version of zlib, you then need to rebuild all your software once we rebuilt zlib. Well, what the build service is going to do is auto build zlib when there's a vulnerability, and then notify out all the core packages that zlib was rebuilt and schedule a bunch of jobs to be run to rebuild those, and etc. So you'll be able to connect your own cluster or workers to the public one, and you'll receive notifications that a dependency underneath was changed, and your builds will automatically be scheduled as well. So for instance, overnight, we find a vulnerability in zlib, and you come in the morning and your acceptance environments were completely updated without your without you noticing at all, with no work done, and you just see that it was updated and it was because of this change, right? So that's the high level pitch of what the build service is. And then the third thing that we're working on is Windows support. We think it's extremely important that the supervisor isn't tied to one operating system. One of the goals of Habitat is to provide a single interface for configuring and managing services regardless of the OS that's underneath them. So Windows is another thing that we're focusing on right now. Those are three cornerstones that we currently are focusing on, but we have community members that are interested in other things. I think it's important for community members to work on the things that they're most passionate about and not just take tickets off of our log.
Yep, I agree with that as well. I think that we're seeing some of that too right now already with various contributions from community members. We just want the general idea here is, and I think I agree with like exposing that stuff somehow, Jamie, I think is super important. I think the more that we can expose of what we're doing internally to the community, it can only help people that are involved or want to be involved, and will only eliminate barriers to entry. So the more that we can do in that regard, I think is super important. And figuring out ways to operationalize that are low friction, that are not like going to create pain points for people that are doing that work. I think that's also important. It's not like it's not good to take the people that are full-time working on this and to make their lives more difficult for the sake of I don't know. But if we can find a happy middle ground, that'd be awesome. So Ben had to drop, but luckily these are all recorded. They'll all be on YouTube after we stop broadcasting. Thanks everybody for all the time. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out, and yeah, and we'll continue this dialogue with the CDG stuff. We're probably going to try to do this every other week, so we won't circle back on any of those discussions probably for 2 weeks. But then the general idea is every 2 weeks we'll take 15 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on if somebody has something they really need to talk about, or if it's, if we can just even spend 10 minutes talking about progress towards those epics. That gets recorded and we can put that out, with what we're doing. Also be good. So, all right. Thanks everybody.
Yeah. See you guys.